I'm Harper. I'm 28 years old. 12 years ago, my parents handed me a plane ticket to a different country and said, "Your real family is there." They drove me to the airport on Christmas Eve with a single suitcase. I was 16. I was wearing pajamas. My adoptive mother didn't even look at me when she closed the car door. "Your real family is overseas," she said through the window. "You've never been ours." I built a new life from nothing. I learned a new language. I put myself through college. I became an architect. I stopped crying about the past. Then a lawyer called, and everything changed. Before I continue, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to stay until the end. And wherever you're watching from, drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know who's listening. Now let me take you back to 3 weeks ago, the day a phone call from Provence turned my world upside down. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk in Lyon, reviewing blueprints for a renovation project, when my phone rang. Unknown number, French area code I didn't recognize. "Miss Ashford?" The voice was formal, measured. "My name is Jean-Pierre Dubois. I'm an estate attorney based in Provence." My stomach tightened. Estate attorney? That meant someone had died. "I'm calling regarding Marguerite Delacroix," he continued. "Your maternal grandmother." I almost dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, my grandmother?" "Yes. I regret to inform you that Madame Delacroix passed away 2 weeks ago. She was 89. I couldn't speak. My adoptive parents had told me my grandmother died years ago. They said there was no one left. They said I had no family in France. They lied. "Miss Ashford, are you still there?" "Yes," I managed. I didn't know she was alive." There was a pause on the other end. When Maître Dubois spoke again, his voice was gentler. "Madame Delacroix was aware of that. She left specific instructions in her will. You are her sole beneficiary." "Sole beneficiary?" "She left you everything. The vineyard estate in Provence, the villa, her investments. In total, approximately 23 million euros. The number didn't register. It couldn't be real. "There's something else you should know," he added. "Your grandmother hired investigators to track your life after you arrived in France. She knew where you were. She knew what you accomplished. She watched from a distance for 12 years. My throat closed. A stranger who shared my blood had watched me struggle, watched me survive, and never reached out. "Why?" I whispered. "Why didn't she contact me?" "She had her reasons. They're explained in a letter she left for you." He paused. "But first, there's a complication. Someone is contesting the will." "Who?" "Your adoptive parents, Richard and Diane Ashford." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my apartment floor with a glass of wine I couldn't drink, staring at the wall, and the memories came flooding back. Christmas Eve. I was 16. There was no tree that year, no presents. I remember thinking it was strange, but I didn't ask questions. I'd learned not to ask questions. My adoptive father called me downstairs after dinner. My adoptive mother was already wearing her coat. A suitcase, my suitcase, sat by the front door. "What's going on?" I asked. Richard handed me an envelope. Inside was a plane ticket. One way. Paris. "Your real family is in France," Diane said. She wouldn't look at me. "Your mother died there. Your people are there. You've never really been ours, Harper. We tried, but..." She shrugged. "It's time." I remember the smell of gingerbread from the neighbor's house. I remember the Christmas lights on the street. I remember begging. "Please. What did I do? I'll do better. "The car's running," Richard said. "Get your coat." They drove me to O'Hare in silence. Diane never turned around, not once. When we pulled up to the departure terminal, she stayed in the car. Richard walked me to the curb, handed me my suitcase, and said, "There's an address inside, a group home in Marseille. They're expecting you." Then he got back in the car and drove away. I was 16 years old, standing in an airport in my pajamas, holding a suitcase and a plane ticket to a country where I didn't speak the language. They told me my mother died in Marseille. She didn't. I learned years later she died in Paris. A car accident when I was 2. Even that small detail, they lied about that too. And now, 12 years later, they wanted my inheritance. The phone buzzed. A text from Maître Dubois. Call me tomorrow. There's something in the adoption file you need to see. The legal documents arrived by courier the next morning. I spread them across my kitchen table and read the complaint 3 times, because surely I was misunderstanding something. Richard and Diane Ashford, plaintiffs, versus estate of Marguerite Delacroix. Their argument was simple. They had raised me for 13 years. They had fed me, clothed me, educated me. Under certain interpretations of American family law, they claimed a right to a portion of any inheritance I received as a minor, or would have received had they maintained custody. They were asking for 50%, 11.5 million euros, for abandoning me at an airport. I called Sophie, my best friend and co-worker. She came over during her lunch break and found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers. They can't actually win this, can they? I asked. Sophie picked up the complaint and scanned it. Her jaw tightened. They're not trying to win, she said. They're trying to pressure you into settling. They know you don't want a public fight. They're betting you'll pay them to go away. She was right. I hated conflict. I'd spent 12 years trying to forget these people existed. How did they even find out about the inheritance? I asked. I only learned about it yesterday. Sophie scrolled through her phone and handed it to me. It was a Facebook post from Diane. A long, tearful message about the daughter we lost and family being torn apart by greed. She'd tagged me, my old American account I hadn't used in years. The post had 3,000 shares, and buried in the comments, someone had written, I heard she inherited millions from some European relative, her poor parents. Diane had made sure everyone knew. She was controlling the narrative before I even knew there was a story to tell. My phone rang. Unknown number. I recognized it this time. I answered. Harper, sweetheart. Diane's voice, thick with tears. We need to talk. I should have hung up. I didn't. Diane, I kept my voice flat. Why are you suing me? Suing? She let out a wounded gasp. Honey, that's such an ugly word. We're not suing you. We're just trying to protect what's fair. For the family. What family? You told me I was never part of yours. Oh, Harper. Her voice cracked perfectly. The same crack I remembered from every time she wanted something. You were so young. You misunderstood. We were trying to help you find your roots. We thought it was what you needed. I heard Richard's voice in the background, muffled. Then he came on the line. Harper, let's not make this adversarial. Your grandmother, rest her soul, she didn't know our family. She didn't know how much we sacrificed for you. If she had, she would have wanted us included. You sent me away. We sent you to find your heritage. That's different. I was 16. I didn't speak French. I ended up in a group home. And look at you now, Diane cut in, back on the phone. You turned out fine. That proves we made the right decision. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You're serious, I said. You actually believe that. We believe in family, Richard said, unlike some people. Here's what I believe, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. I believe I'm done with this conversation. I believe your lawyers can talk to my lawyer, and I believe that if you contact me directly again, I'll consider it harassment. Harper, goodbye, Richard. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but something inside me felt solid for the first time in days. I'd spent 12 years wondering what I'd say to them if I ever got the chance. Now I knew. Not much. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them closure. I owed them nothing. They didn't listen. 2 days later, Diane called again, this time from a different number. Baby girl, please don't shut us out. Her voice trembled. We miss you so much. All those years apart, it broke my heart. I sat on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, and let her talk. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with. Mommy just wants to make things right, she continued. We can be a family again. All this legal nonsense, it's just paperwork. What matters is that we love you. If you love me, I said slowly, why are you suing me? We're not suing you, sweetheart. We're protecting you. That French lawyer, he doesn't have your best interests at heart. He's just after his fees. But we know you. We raised you. Richard's voice came through, speakerphone. Harper, let's meet in person, in Provence. We'll fly over next week, sit down like a family and sort this out without lawyers poisoning everything. Without lawyers, I repeated. Just us, the people who matter. I thought about what Sophie had said. They're betting you'll pay them to go away. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. Why not? Diane's voice sharpened for just a second before softening again. Honey, we're your parents. You can trust us. You drove me to an airport in my pajamas and left me there. Silence. Then Richard. You're remembering it wrong. You wanted to go. You were curious about France. I was crying. I begged you not to leave me. Children cry about everything. It doesn't mean I'm not a child anymore. I cut him off. And I'm not remembering it wrong. Diane made a small, wounded sound. You're breaking my heart, Harper. You broke mine first. I hung up. I called Maître Dubois that afternoon. They want to meet in Provence, I told him. Without lawyers. They called it a family discussion. Absolutely not. His voice was firm. That's a negotiating tactic. They want to pressure you into an agreement before you understand your legal position. I figured. Miss Ashford, Harper, there's something I need to tell you. I've been looking into the adoption records. Your grandmother requested copies years ago. I sat down. What did you find? Richard Ashford worked in banking in the early 2000s. Specifically, he handled international wire transfers for high net worth clients. He paused. Including the Delacroix family. The room tilted slightly. He knew about my grandmother, before they adopted me. It appears so. I can't prove intent yet, but the timeline is suggestive. I thought about 13 years of birthday cards signed Love, Mom and Dad. 13 years of being told I was lucky they chose me. 13 years of feeling like I owed them something I could never repay. Was any of it real? I whispered. I don't know, Maître Dubois said gently. But I have a contact, a social worker in Chicago who handled adoptions in that period. She's retired now, but she kept copies of her files. She's been following the news coverage of the lawsuit. News coverage? Diane Ashford has been quite active on social media. Several local outlets in the U.S. have picked up the story. Ungrateful daughter abandons loving parents. That sort of angle. My stomach turned. The social worker reached out to me directly, he continued. She says she has information. She's willing to share it. What kind of information? She didn't specify, but she used an interesting word. He paused. She said she wanted to make things right. That night, an email arrived from a woman named Claire Donovan. The subject line read, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. They showed up anyway. I was at Maître Dubois's office in Aix-en-Provence, reviewing documents, when his assistant knocked on the door. There are people in the lobby. They say they're your parents. My blood went cold. Tell them. They're insisting. They brought a young woman with them. They say they won't leave until you see them. Maître Dubois looked at me. You don't have to do this. I know. I stood up. But I need to see their faces. I need to know what I'm dealing with. We walked to the lobby together. There they were. Richard in a pressed blazer, looking like he'd just stepped off a golf course. Diane in a floral dress, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. And beside them, a young woman I barely recognized. Megan. The girl they'd adopted 2 years after me. The one who got piano lessons and summer camps and a bedroom that wasn't in the basement. She'd grown up. 24 now, I calculated. Pretty. Nervous. Harper! Diane rushed toward me, arms outstretched. I stepped back. "Don't touch me." She froze, her face crumpling. "Baby." "I'm not your baby. I'm not your daughter. I'm not your anything." Richard put a hand on Diane's shoulder. "Harper, there's no need for hostility. We came all this way. The least you can do is hear us out." "You came uninvited. You're interfering with legal proceedings, and you brought—" I looked at Megan. "Why are you here?" Megan's voice was small. "They said you might want to meet me, that we could be sisters." Something twisted in my chest. It wasn't her fault. None of this was her fault. "You're not part of this," I told her, as gently as I could. "This isn't about you." Diane started sobbing louder. She turned to Maître Dubois. You see what she's become? We lost our daughter." He looked at her evenly. "Madam Ashford, my client has asked you not to touch her. I suggest you respect that boundary." "Boundary," Richard scoffed. "Family doesn't have boundaries." "Mine does," I said. After they left, escorted out by building security after Richard raised his voice, Maître Dubois closed the door to his office and pulled out a worn manila folder. "I was going to wait," he said, "but I think you need to see this now." He spread several documents across his desk. I recognized the format. Adoption agency paperwork, dated 2001. "These are copies from the original file. Your grandmother obtained them through legal channels years ago." I scanned the pages. Standard forms, background checks, home study reports. Then I saw it. A single line, highlighted in yellow. Family background of child, maternal grandmother, Marguerite Delacroix, residing in Provence, France. Significant assets reported. "They knew," I said. The words came out hollow. "They knew before they signed the adoption papers." Maître Dubois pointed to another document. "This is a note from the agency caseworker. She flagged the application because Richard Ashford asked multiple questions about your biological family's financial status. She found it unusual." Unusual. The word she used in her notes was concerning, but the adoption went through anyway. Budget cuts, understaffing, you know how these things work. I stared at the papers. 13 years of my life, reduced to a line item. "Your grandmother tried to make contact when you were 8, he continued. "She sent letters, gifts. The Ashfords returned everything unopened. They told her you didn't want a relationship." "I didn't know she existed." "I know." His voice was soft. "She knew that too, eventually. That's why she kept her distance after you came to France. She didn't want to intrude on the life you'd built. She watched me struggle for 12 years. She watched you succeed. There's a difference." He paused. "She wanted you to know you could do it on your own. Then she wanted to give you everything she had." My eyes burned. "There's more in these files," he said, "but it will take time to verify. The social worker, Claire Donovan, she has the rest of the pieces." I wiped my face. "When can I talk to her?" "She's flying in next week. She wants to testify in person." That night, I read Claire Donovan's email 7 times. "Dear Harper, my name is Claire Donovan. In 2001, I was the caseworker assigned to your adoption. I processed the paperwork for Richard and Diane Ashford. I've carried guilt about your case for 25 years. Something felt wrong from the beginning. The Ashfords asked too many questions about your biological family, specifically about assets, properties, inheritance potential. I noted my concerns in the file, but my supervisor said I was being paranoid. Some adoptive parents just want to know the full picture, she said. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Last month I was cleaning out my home office before retirement. I found backup copies of files I'd saved, including yours. And I found something I'd forgotten about. An email Richard Ashford accidentally CC'd to the agency when corresponding with his private attorney. The email discussed the long-term financial potential of the child and establishing legal parenthood as a prerequisite to inheritance claims. The date on that email was December 15th, 2014, 9 days before they sent you to France. I'm attaching a scan of the original. I've verified its authenticity with our IT department and with the attorney's former firm. I don't know if this helps your case. I hope it does. But more than that, I want you to know, you were never the problem. You were never unlovable. You were a child who deserved better, and the system failed you. I'm flying to Provence next week. I'll testify to whatever you need me to testify to. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you back then. I'm fighting now. Claire. I sat in the dark for a long time, holding my phone. 9 days. They'd planned it 9 days before Christmas. All those years I'd wondered what I'd done wrong, what I could have changed, and the answer was nothing. It was never about me. It was always about money. I need to pause here for a moment. If you're still watching, I have a question for you. Have you ever met someone like Richard and Diane? Someone who performs love when it's convenient and discards you when it's not? I'd really like to know. Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if you want to see what happened when everything came out in public, when they finally had to face the truth in front of witnesses, hit that like button so I know you're still with me. Now, back to the story. The Ashfords requested a family meeting before the formal mediation hearing. Against Maître Dubois' advice, I agreed, but with conditions. Public place, witnesses present, no private conversations. They chose a cafe in the center of Aix-en-Provence. When Sophie and I arrived, I understood why. Richard had invited an audience. 4 well-dressed Americans sat at nearby tables, positioned too perfectly to be coincidental. Business associates, I guessed. People who could later testify that they'd seen Harper Ashford be unreasonable and cold to her loving parents. Diane spotted me first. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan, soft, maternal. Her eyes were already wet. Harper, thank God. She reached for my hand across the table. I didn't give it to her. Richard got straight to business. We've discussed it with our lawyers. 40%. That's a fair compromise. 40% of what you're not entitled to? Of what we earned. His voice stayed measured, but his jaw tightened. 13 years of raising you. Do you know how much that cost us? I wasn't aware parenting came with an invoice. Diane made a small wounded sound. We sacrificed everything for you. Richard left a promotion to spend more time at home. I thought about my bedroom in their basement. I thought about Megan's bedroom upstairs, with the bay window and the walk-in closet. Is that what you told yourselves? It's the truth. Richard leaned forward. Your grandmother didn't understand our situation. If we can sit down together, maybe we can make the lawyers see. See what? That family should come before paperwork. One of the American men at the next table nodded approvingly. I looked at Richard, then at Diane, then at the carefully arranged audience. You planned this, I said quietly. You wanted witnesses. You wanted people to see me refuse. Richard's smile didn't waver. I wanted people to see who you really are. Fine, I stood up. Then let them watch. Diane stood up too. Her voice rose, pitched for the surrounding tables. You all need to understand something. She pressed a hand to her chest. We rescued this girl. Her mother was a drug addict who died in the streets. We gave Harper everything, a home, an education, a future, and this is how she repays us. The cafe went quiet, heads turned. I felt Sophie tense beside me. My mother was a school teacher, I said. She died in a car accident when I was 2. She was sober her entire life. That's what they told you. Diane's eyes glittered. But we saw the records. We know what kind of family you come from. Richard stepped in, voice heavy with rehearsed sorrow. Harper has always had issues. We tried therapy. We tried everything. But some children... He shook his head. Blood will tell. The American audience murmured sympathetically. One woman actually patted Diane's arm. I stood frozen. The lies were so big, so shameless, that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. Then a voice cut through the noise. I don't know who you people are. An older French woman had risen from her table near the window. Her accent was thick, her expression disgusted. But I know what I'm hearing, and if this is how Americans speak about their children, in public, to strangers, then I am ashamed for you. The cafe went silent again. Diane's face flushed red. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw it. The panic behind the performance, the calculation behind the tears. I'm done here, I said. The next time we speak, it will be in front of a mediator, and I will have documentation that proves everything you just said is a lie. Richard's smile finally cracked. Documentation? Letters, records, emails. I paused. You should have been more careful about who you CC'd. I walked out before they could respond. I made it 3 blocks before I started shaking. Sophie caught my arm and steered me into a quiet alley between buildings. I leaned against the stone wall, breathing hard. They called my mother a drug addict. My voice cracked. In front of strangers. She was a teacher. She taught 2nd grade. I know. Sophie's hand was warm on my shoulder. They're desperate. That's what desperation looks like. It looks like cruelty. It looks like people who know they're going to lose. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The anger was building now, hot and clean, burning away the shock. I want to destroy them, I said. Sophie studied me. Do you? Or do you want them to face consequences? I thought about it. Consequences, real ones. I want them to answer for what they did, in front of witnesses, with evidence, on the record. Then that's what we'll do. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Maître Dubois. We're moving up the mediation. That night, alone in the small apartment that came with the estate, I called the lawyer myself. The email from Claire Donovan, I said, the one Richard sent his attorney. Can you verify it independently? I already have. The metadata checks out. The law firm confirmed their records match. He paused. Harper, this email proves premeditation. They planned to use you as a pathway to your grandmother's money. When that failed, they discarded you. And now that she's dead and the money is accessible, they're trying again. Will it hold up in mediation? It will do more than that. For the first time, I heard something like satisfaction in his voice. Your grandmother also left a letter to be read at the hearing. I think you'll find it illuminating. What does it say? The full truth, he said. Everything they tried to hide. The mediation was held in a small hearing room at the Aix-en-Provence courthouse. High ceilings, tall windows, the French coat of arms mounted on the wall behind the mediator's bench. I arrived early with Sophie. We sat on one side of the U-shaped table arrangement, Maître Dubois beside me with his files organized in neat stacks. The Ashfords came in 5 minutes late, a power move, I assumed. Richard walked like he owned the room. Diane had fresh tears already glistening. Their attorney, a sharp-faced man from an American firm with a Marseille branch, carried an oversized briefcase, but I barely noticed them, because sitting in the row of chairs behind us was Claire Donovan. She was smaller than I'd imagined, gray-haired, maybe late 50s, wearing a simple navy blazer. When our eyes met, she nodded once, steady, certain. She'd flown across an ocean to be here. For me. A child she'd processed 16 years ago and never forgotten. Are all parties present? The mediator was a woman in her 60s, crisp and no nonsense. Judge Moreau, according to the nameplate. Present for the petitioners, the Ashford attorney said. Present for the respondent, Maître Dubois replied. Judge Moreau reviewed her notes. This mediation concerns the contested estate of Marguerite Delacroix. The petitioners claim a right to inheritance based on their status as adoptive parents of the sole beneficiary. She looked up. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, before we proceed, I have a simple question. Richard straightened. Of course, Your Honor. Prior to adopting Harper Ashford, were you aware of the existence and financial status of her biological grandmother, Marguerite Delacroix? The room went still. Richard's smile stayed fixed, but something flickered behind his eyes. Absolutely not. We had no knowledge of... Thank you. Judge Moreau made a note. Counsel for the respondent, you may present your evidence. Maître Dubois opened his folder. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit A. Maître Dubois passed copies to the mediator and opposing counsel. This is an email dated March 15, 2001, 6 weeks before the Ashfords' adoption of Harper was finalized. I watched Richard's face. He was still smiling, but his hands had gone very still. The email was sent by Richard Ashford to his personal attorney at the time. It was inadvertently CC'd to the adoption agency, where it remained in the archived files. Maître Dubois paused. Ms. Claire Donovan, the caseworker who processed the adoption, is present today to verify the document's authenticity. Judge Moreau read the email in silence. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. I will read the relevant passage aloud for the record, she said. The child has a maternal grandmother residing in Provence, France, with significant assets, vineyard, real estate, investments. If we establish legal parenthood, we position ourselves favorably for any future inheritance claims. This is a long-term investment. The words hung in the air. Diane let out a small gasp. That's taken out of context. Mrs. Ashford, Judge Moreau's voice was ice. You will have an opportunity to respond. Until then, remain silent. Richard's attorney was flipping through pages frantically. Your Honor, this document was never disclosed during the original proceedings. Because it was buried in agency archives, Maître Dubois said calmly, until Ms. Donovan found it last month while preparing for retirement. Judge Moreau looked at Claire. Ms. Donovan, can you verify this document? Claire stood. Her voice was clear and unwavering. Yes, Your Honor. I received this email on March 15, 2010. I flagged my concerns to my supervisor. I was told to proceed with the adoption anyway. She paused. I have regretted that decision for 16 years. I heard Diane start to cry. Real tears this time, or at least different ones. Richard's smile was gone. I have one additional item to present. Maître Dubois withdrew a sealed envelope from his briefcase. This is a letter written by Marguerite Delacroix and included with her will. Per her instructions, it is to be read aloud at any legal proceeding concerning the estate. Judge Moreau nodded. Proceed. Maître Dubois broke the seal and began to read. My dearest Harper, by the time you hear this, I will be gone. But I want you to know the truth, all of it. I stopped breathing. I knew about you from the day you were born. Your mother, my daughter Elise, sent me photographs every week. When she died in the accident, I was devastated. I wanted to raise you myself, but I was 71 and living in another country, and the American authorities said a grandmother overseas was not a suitable guardian. Diane made a strangled sound. Richard stared at the table. When the Ashfords adopted you, I was hopeful. I wrote letters, I sent gifts. Every single one was returned unopened. They told me you wanted nothing to do with me. I believed them, until I learned otherwise. My chest ached. In 2014, your adoptive parents contacted me directly. They asked for money. They said if I didn't pay them to continue supporting you, they would send you back to the foster system. I refused. I believed they were bluffing. Maître Dubois paused. When he continued, his voice was softer. 9 days later, they put you on a plane to France. You were 16 years old. You had nothing. And he cleared his throat. I watched you arrive at the group home in Marseille. I watched you learn French, find work, put yourself through school. I wanted so badly to reveal myself. But I thought, if she can do all this alone, she must not need an old woman complicating her life. I wiped my face. I didn't care who saw. I was wrong. I should have come to you sooner. I hope this inheritance is some small compensation for all the years I stayed silent. But more than money, I want you to know, you were never unwanted. You were loved, from afar, imperfectly, but completely. Always. The room was silent. Then Richard exploded. This is hearsay. He shoved back from the table. That woman was senile. She didn't know what she was writing. We never... Mr. Ashford. Judge Moreau's voice cut through like a blade. Sit down. We cared for that child for 13 years. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, which I strongly suggest you exercise. Diane was sobbing openly now, her careful makeup ruined. We loved her. We did. Whatever mistakes we made. Mistakes? I spoke before I could stop myself. You contacted my grandmother and demanded money. When she refused, you abandoned me. That's not a mistake. That's a transaction. You don't understand. Richard's voice was desperate now. We were in debt. We needed... Richard! His attorney grabbed his arm. Stop talking. But Richard pulled away. She owes us. We gave her everything. You gave me nothing. I stood. My voice was steady. You used me. When I stopped being useful, you threw me away. And now you want to profit from my grandmother's death, a woman you prevented me from ever knowing. A small voice cut through the chaos. It's true. Everyone turned. Megan had stood up from her seat behind her parents. Her face was pale, but her voice didn't waver. I heard them, she said. Years ago. I was maybe 12. They were fighting about money, and Dad said... She swallowed. He said Harper was a losing bet. He said they should have cut their losses sooner. Diane's face went white. Megan, sweetheart, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Megan looked at me. I'm sorry, Harper. I should have said something sooner. I was scared. Megan, Richard's voice was a warning. No, Dad. She shook her head. I'm done being scared of you. Judge Moreau waited until the room settled. Her face was unreadable, but I noticed she hadn't once looked at Richard or Diane with anything resembling sympathy. I've heard enough, she folded her hands. The claim brought by Richard and Diane Ashford is rejected in its entirety. Diane let out a wail. Richard's attorney started to object, but the judge raised her hand. The evidence presented today demonstrates that the petitioners adopted Harper Ashford with the explicit intention of accessing her biological family's wealth. When that plan failed, they terminated their parental responsibilities and abandoned a minor child in a foreign country. She paused. This is not a family dispute. This is attempted fraud. Richard's face had gone gray. Your Honor, I am not finished. Judge Moreau's voice hardened. The petitioners will bear all legal costs for both parties. Furthermore, I am referring this case file to the appropriate authorities for investigation into potential adoption fraud and child abandonment. The words landed like stones. This mediation is concluded. Judge Moreau gathered her papers. Ms. Ashford, you are the sole and rightful heir to Marguerite Delacroix's estate. I suggest you retain competent counsel to manage the transition. A ghost of warmth crossed her face. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Then she was gone. Diane rushed toward me, arms outstretched. Harper, please, we can work this out. I'm your mother. I stepped back. You were never my mother. Harper, I don't need your apology. I don't need your explanations. I looked at her, really looked, at the woman who'd closed the car door and driven away. I just need you to leave me alone, permanently. You can't mean that. I mean every word. I turned to Maître Dubois. We're done here. I walked out of that courtroom with Sophie on one side, and 12 years of silence finally broken. Behind me, I heard Diane still crying. I didn't look back. Let me pause the story here. I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, what would you have said to Richard and Diane? Would you have tried to forgive them? Would you have wanted more? A public apology or some kind of punishment? I'm genuinely curious. Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story has meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You might be the reason they find the strength to set their own boundaries. Now let me tell you what happened after. The story broke 3 days later. A French journalist who'd been in the courthouse that day, apparently covering an unrelated case, overheard enough to start digging. Her article ran in a regional paper first, then got picked up by larger outlets. American couple sues adopted daughter for inheritance. Court reveals 16-year fraud scheme. Sophie texted me the link with a single message: "You might want to sit down." Within a week, the story had crossed the Atlantic. American news sites ran their own versions. Parents accused of adopting child as long-term investment. Couple abandons teen at airport, returns years later to claim millions. Diane's Facebook went dark. Richard's LinkedIn profile disappeared. Someone dug up their country club membership and posted that they'd been asked to resign. The comments were brutal. Thousands of strangers calling them monsters, frauds, abusers. Part of me felt something like satisfaction. A larger part felt hollow. "They're getting what they deserve," Sophie said when she saw my face. "Maybe." I stared at my phone. "But this doesn't fix anything. My grandmother is still dead. I still grew up thinking no one wanted me." "That's true." Sophie sat beside me. "But now the world knows the truth. That matters." It did matter. I just wasn't sure how to feel about it yet. A week after the article went viral, I received an email from Claire Donovan. "Harper, the Child Welfare Office in Illinois has opened a formal review of the Ashfords adoption case. They're investigating whether fraud occurred during the application process. I've submitted all my documentation. This won't undo what happened to you, but maybe it will prevent it from happening to someone else. I'm rooting for you. Claire." I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop and walked outside to look at the vineyard. My grandmother's vineyard. Mine now. Somewhere in America, Richard and Diane were watching their reputation collapse. I felt nothing, and that, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. Diane called one last time. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure. I don't know. Her voice was different this time. No tears, no performance, just cold. "I hope you're satisfied." She spoke slowly, like every word was costing her. "You've destroyed this family. Everything your father and I built, gone. Because you couldn't just be grateful. Grateful for what? For a home. For parents. For 13 years of our lives." I sat down on the stone wall outside the villa. The evening sun was warm on my face. "Diane, you didn't give me a home. You gave me a basement room. You didn't give me parents. You gave me investors who expected returns." I paused. "And you didn't give me 13 years. You gave me 13 years of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I just didn't know what it was until now. You're going to regret this." Her voice sharpened. "You're going to end up alone. No family, no one who really knows you, just money and strangers." Maybe. I watched a bird land on the vineyard fence. But I'd rather be alone by choice than surrounded by people who only keep me around when it's profitable. Silence on the line. "You were never an easy child," she said finally. "I should have known you'd turn out like this." "Like what? Successful? Independent? Unwilling to be manipulated?" She hung up. I blocked her number, then Richard's. Then I sat in the fading light and felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there. A week later, a package arrived from Megan. Inside was a small box of photographs, pictures of me as a child that Richard and Diane had planned to throw away. The note said, "These belong to you. I'm sorry it took me so long to do the right thing. M." I held the photos for a long time. Then I put them somewhere safe. 3 months later, I moved into the villa. It wasn't a dramatic change. I still worked at the architecture firm in Lyon, still met Sophie for coffee on Saturday mornings. But now I had space, a garden, a view of the vineyard where my grandmother had spent her final years watching over me from a distance. I used part of the inheritance to establish a scholarship fund for young people aging out of foster care. I named it after my mother, Elise Delacroix, the school teacher I'd never known. The rest I invested carefully, not because I needed 23 million euros, but because I wanted it to last, to matter, to become something more than money in an account. Sophie came down for a long weekend in June. We sat on the terrace drinking wine from grapes my grandmother had planted 30 years ago. Have you heard from them? She asked. The Ashfords? Nothing. I blocked their numbers. Apparently they've moved to Arizona, somewhere without much of a social scene. Running from their reputation. Running from themselves. I swirled my glass. I don't think about them much anymore. It's strange. I spent 12 years wondering what I did wrong, and now I barely remember their faces. That's healthy. It feels like forgetting. I paused, but also like healing. I can't always tell the difference. The next morning, I drove to Paris, to a cemetery I'd never visited. My mother's grave was simple. A small headstone with her name, her dates, and a line of poetry I didn't recognize. Someone had been leaving flowers. My grandmother, I realized, for decades. I sat on the grass and talked to her for an hour, about the life I'd built, about the grandmother I'd never met, about the future I was finally starting to imagine. I wish I'd known you, I said at the end, but I'm proud to be your daughter. The wind stirred the flowers. I chose to believe she heard me. 1 year after the mediation, I wrote a single public post. I wasn't trying to go viral. I just needed to say it, once, clearly, on my own terms. A lot of people have asked me about my story. Here's the short version. I was adopted at 3, abandoned at 16, and spent 12 years building a life from nothing. Then I inherited money from a grandmother I never knew, and the people who abandoned me tried to take it. They failed. But this isn't a revenge story. I don't hate Richard and Diane Ashford. Hating them would mean they still have power over me, and they don't. They lost that power when I stopped letting their definition of family determine my worth. Here's what I've learned. Family isn't who raised you. It's who shows up. It's who stays. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. And being alone by choice is 1,000 times better than being with people who only want you when you're useful. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for attention. I just wanted to say, for anyone who needs to hear it, you are not defined by the people who failed you. You are defined by who you choose to become. Thank you for listening. The post was shared over 50,000 times. I stopped counting after that. A month later, Megan sent me another message. She'd moved out of her parents' house. She was working, going to therapy, trying to understand the family she'd grown up in. I know we're not really sisters, she wrote, but I'd like to be friends someday, if you're open to it. I thought about it for a long time. Then I wrote back, I'd like that too. Not forgiveness, not forgetting. Just forward. And that, finally, was enough. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this. You don't owe anyone your loyalty just because they have a title. Mother, father, family. Those words mean nothing without the actions to back them up. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's how you protect your peace. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who only see you as a means to an end. If you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who are supposed to love you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Tell me your story. And if this video meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. There's another story linked in the description about a woman who stood up to a family that tried to erase her. I think you'll relate. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Take care of yourself.